Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm a minute or so late. I've jumping around meetings and all over the place.
That's all right. You said you were going to be, quite tight on the getting here for 10:30, so that's
all good.
Fine. Yeah, just glad nothing overran.
No.
So, right. So what we'll do is this meeting's being recorded, obviously, and going to be sent out. So what I'll do is I'll do a brief intro to the discussion, and then if you'd all like to introduce yourselves, I'll go through you one after the other. Introduce yourselves and what you do, and then we'll just we'll start the discussion with some questions, and it'll be a free-flowing discussion. So we'll see. I've got some prepared questions, but we'll see where the conversation takes us. I'm sure between the three of us, we'll have some of the four of us, we'll have some interesting topics and thoughts around the subject. So if we get underway. So welcome to the International Employment and Skills Forum, Business Insights. What we're looking to do on this is essentially is looking at post-Brexit, and the way UK recruits from abroad will change. Job seekers from the rest of the world are now on a level playing field with job seekers from the EU. So I'm interested to see what lessons can British companies do they need to learn about recruiting in this new era. What experiences are there from other countries, and what is international recruitment and employment and filling skill sets like nowadays. As I said, it's a free-flowing conversation around those subjects of international employment skills. Our panel members here have different experiences to draw upon in this discussion, so I'm sure it'll be very interesting to listen to. So I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves to everybody now. We'll start with Steve Simmons. If you could just briefly introduce yourself.
I'm Steve Simmons. I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I have a company called Synergy GRC that is very much involved in risk and compliance and cyber security. A lot of my work is involved in that area. But the other area I'm very involved in is SME development, in the aspect of a learning management system we're building online with a company called Go1 in Australia that's going to be used for developing our SMEs here who are getting loans from business and loans from the banks. So because a lot of our businesses in South Africa don't last long, within the first year you're looking at about 80% of them failing, and of course the banks lose money and the businesses lose money. So our role there is to ensure by running a 7-day course, like an express business course over 7 days with business simulations built in, is to help these small business SMEs owners to be able to carry on and actually fulfill the role they want to do in their business and just grow and empower the people. So that's pretty much what I do.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, sounds like some interesting projects going on there, Steve, as well. And next, Sari, if you could introduce yourself, please.
I shall unmute. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Sari. As you can hear from the accent, I'm not local, so I'm actually originally from Finland, but I've lived in the UK for 26 years. And before that, I lived in Switzerland for a year and a half. And throughout my whole 30-decade career, I have been working with global companies. So this whole global setting, working internationally, is kind of business as usual for me. And there is so much that we kind of need to understand about that environment. I'm really thrilled to be here today. But my normal life is I have a company called Muutos. So I help people understand people. I guess that's the way to say it. So Muutos empowers tech companies to create outstanding and really thriving company culture. And we help them achieve both the organizational and individual performance. We help them improve productivity and the talent retention by minimizing staff unhappiness and stress. And we really focus on things that really matter in a workplace. We aim to find the root causes for any people-related challenges and really fix them for good. So we assess and measure how the workforce is feeling. We educate employees and managers alike and equip them with really empowering new knowledge and tools that enable them to basically take charge of their own well-being, and I call it brain productivity. So the cognitive performance which we all need, especially in the tech world. and we mentor managers and help them bring the best out of their teams. And the cultural awareness is really one of the enablers for organizational performance and individual performance as well, to some extent, when we live in this international setting. So that's about what I do, and yeah, cultural awareness and understanding how to move people and resources across the borders. I think it's very interesting, and it's really becoming very, very important in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Lovely. Thank you very much, Sari. And Sam, if you'd like to just introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sam. I'm one of the account directors and the marketing manager at Logical Recruitment Partners. We are a UK-based recruitment agency specifically focused on bilingual, trilingual customer service, sales, and tech support roles. In the UK, we have a large UK temporary division that focuses, it mainly at the moment focuses on English speakers, but our bread and butter, so to speak, and our core is our European permanent business, where we focus on relocating bilinguals, trilinguals, customer service, sales, and tech support consultants to various locations that we have within Europe. So we would move a German and English speaker who doesn't necessarily have any experience, but we would offer them positions in Lisbon or Athens, even Hungary, Romania, the Netherlands, to start their career journey in a BPO, BPO being business process outsourcer, in the call center vertical. So if you called up Facebook this afternoon, there's a good chance that you'll be speaking to someone at one of our clients in Lisbon. And that's basically what we do. So interesting, the conversation is interesting for us because we don't move many English speakers from England to Europe anyway, and we never have done. But it would be interesting to see how that's going to change going forward, if it changes, and what the requirements are going to be. What are our clients and how are our clients going to deal with it, and how are Europe going to deal with someone who was a partner 6 months ago and is now not so going forward. Obviously, our European friends in Germany won't have a problem in moving, or France, or anywhere like that they'll be fine to move across the continent. But specifically interesting is how we build up the UK arm of the business when we haven't got as many people coming into the UK, and we can't migrate people away from the UK if they want to.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting for a lot of people, but particularly a business like yours, as you say, Sam. I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Steve Ackroyd. I'm the owner of the Job Guru. We're a recruitment specialist for small businesses. We help small businesses to find the right people to help them grow their business. My background, I've come from recruiting for large government organisations, recruiting very highly skilled people from abroad to come and work into the UK, and also people to work abroad in areas across Asia and Southeast Asia as well. But my main focus is UK, so it's interesting to have the three panel members with such great experience in other countries and other cultures. I want to start with Sam on my first question, really, because you have that experience, and Logical has that experience recruiting across Europe, as you've just described. I wondered, in your experience, is there much variation in the way companies recruit in other European countries? Do they all tend to recruit the same way, or do they have different styles, different expectations, different processes even?
So we work in a very specific vertical, which is a BPO call center. And our clients are always after people, forever and a day. the average job life expectancy, so to speak, within a BPO is about 4 to 6 months. And that's because they recruit people right in at the lowest end of the salary band that they can get people on. And then they work hard. In a similar way that you would do here, you know, the people who work in minimum wage jobs here have a tendency to work the hardest, I'd say, and that's having worked minimum wage jobs in a previous life. And as a result of that in Europe and in the UK, there is certainly a challenge in making sure that our candidates get through the process easily and quickly. So if you were recruiting someone in the UK for a small company or even a big company, there would be steps in place, and there would be a very clear process of, right, their candidates come forward to us, they're a fantastic candidate, they've been screened by the recruitment agency that you've employed in the first place, to kind of, or employed only when a placement's made. But so there's a clear process. That's not so clear within a BPO sometimes, because such a volume of candidates coming and going, that it's, you know, find who you can, and then hopefully that person will come and go, you know, and will stick almost. And I'm saying this in the lightest possible way because we have a lot of clients, and we're picking up clients at the moment almost on a daily basis, literally. And it's because of the challenges within the recruitment part of the process that we are called upon to go in and help look at the recruitment process, more so than finding candidates. Sometimes we will help the recruitment process become better. So, one of our clients, once upon a time, it would take 30 days from a candidate applying to the job, 30 working days for a candidate to apply to a job, for them to actually get the job in the first place, to go, yes, you're employed. And that's crazy when there's such a massive demand for candidates in the first place. So what we do is we go in and we say, why, and we keep asking questions, and we find people who aren't in the recruitment team, and we talk to people, and we understand challenges. We don't necessarily rip it apart, but we get people to a point where they're going, that makes sense. And with some of our clients, we get that 30 days down to 2 days, which is an ideal time for a candidate, because candidates will always take the first job that they're offered.
Yes, if they're at that level of minimum wage, that's...
95% of the time, if you're offered a job, certainly a minimum wage, you're going to take it. If you're offered 2 jobs, you're going to ignore the second one because you've already taken the first. So you've got to be quick. And if you're going to get the right talent, you've got to be quick. But the beauty of working in the BPO industry is that, and working for the BPO industry, is that people have a career. I can guarantee you, if you work hard and you stick at the entry level position, all of the directors, senior managers, country managers, CEOs in many of the BPOs that we recruit for started in this position. And you can go on LinkedIn and you can look at that, and it's the career journeys are fantastic. They're really, really good. So in answer to your question of is it different? It's different because it's a BPO, but in terms of the multilingual aspect or bilingual aspect of it, it's pretty similar. And all BPOs are pretty similar in the challenges that they have in finding candidates and finding the right talent.
So the processes are the same in Poland as they are in Portugal. For example,
they're all a little bit broken, and they could all be better. But you could say that about most companies anyway, I would imagine. But no, we don't tend to find many differences. One thing, there's obviously different cultures that work slightly differently. So Spain, in Spain specifically, we have they're very process driven. This is not the process. Why are you breaking it? In Portugal, they're a lot more free to go, okay, just have a chat with that person or whatever it may be. In Athens, in Greece, there's the culture that it's you're coming in from outside. So why are you trying to change what's been done in Greece for many years? So there's slight cultural differences in the way that people work, and having worked in America and India previously, that's pretty normal.
Yes.
We are equally a pain in the backside here in the UK for a lot of people outside of the UK. So it's probably a challenge if you don't know how the different cultures work.
Yeah, and that's a really great opportunity. And thanks for that answer, Sam. It was a great answer. Really interesting to actually hear about the BPO, the way that works, and the recruitment works on that as well. And at the end, as you said, it's the different cultural differences that you're dealing with, the way they look at processes. It's a great time to bring in Sari, I think, who has a lot of cultural insights, I think, working in different countries and working with businesses. How do you find, Sari, what the cultural implications are when we're looking at recruitment for other countries with those different ways of working, as Sam has said, the attitudes to process, attitudes to authority, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there are the implications. I was when I was kind of preparing this this session, and I thought, at which stages do we really need to acknowledge the cultural differences when we think about recruiting people, bringing people across the borders, so to speak? And I thought, well, it's basically throughout the whole process, because if we just think about the early stages of recruiting, we really need to understand the culture that where we are recruiting from. So, you know, the country that I'm putting the job posting to. Even think about, well, first of all, which language do we use in the posting? Are we aiming for English description or local description? And how do we describe the job? Because again, you know, the different words have a different meaning in different cultures, and the emphasis we potentially need to put into the jobs or the descriptions, that needs to be different at times in different countries. So it even starts with, how are we going to create a job description that makes sense in the local culture? And because people's expectations are different and the cultures, the way how they operate are so different, I think it's really important that we very clearly describe the practicalities or the day-to-day responsibilities, and to some extent even the day-to-day living when it impacts job, to the candidates from the different cultures, because there are so many differences. So I guess if we want to target the ideal candidates, I guess the more information we can give them at the time we post the job, the more we can, the job posting itself can start selecting the candidates already, because when we clearly explain these things. And just in my experience, moving from country to country, just even the work practices, the working hours, the length of lunch breaks, they differ hugely from country to country. We know that the southern countries, they have their siestas and they have 2-hour lunches, whereby in the UK it's not very welcomed. You really shouldn't be buggering off for 4 hours on end. And so those kind of things. So again, I believe that the more we can give that information, the better. Of course, I haven't been dealing with the kind of the minimal wage sector, because I have been in the kind of IT profession. So we have been highly skilled people. So of course the recruiting and the attraction is slightly different. But I think the same applies, that the more information you give at the earliest, then you start the ideal candidates potentially start coming to you better. And then of course it's hugely important that when we start onboarding those people, so we have selected an employee and we want them to come to our country. The onboarding process, I was really privileged in a way, and of course those we go back quite many years, so 28 years and 26 years when I have been moving countries. But I moved countries with a amazing company, well, Hewlett-Packard. So of course those times the onboarding process and the relocation process, it was absolutely astonishing. The support was so amazing that when we created the organization in Bristol 1994, and it was the European Support Center. So we basically had over 10 nationalities coming from all around the Europe into our organization, and we were then supporting more than 30 countries all around the EMEA. The relocation was so brilliant for us because everything was kind of taken into account. So it was helping really at this end to find places to live and help buying cars and introduction to the British culture. It was all included. So I think that's it. If you want to really start utilizing your employees from day one, you want to make them effective and productive as quickly as possible, the more help you can give them for those things which are outside the job, I think the more benefits you will start getting. So those recruiting, thinking about the cultural differences in recruiting, so the early stages, and definitely when you start kind of bringing people on board here, there are so many aspects to think about. And the cultures, they do really differ with their decision making and the risk avoidance. Even the working relationships, what sort of relationship you have with your manager, how that's going to be handled, the attitude towards authority. There are just so many aspects.
There's a lot to think about there, isn't there? Sorry,
Yeah.
there really is. And actually, I'm quite interested in you mentioned about the languages used and advertising in the language of the person you're looking to recruit, which is interesting because sometimes I'm sure with whether Sam's got an experience of this, and I'll come to Steve on languages in a moment as well, there with relation to South Africa. But if you're recruiting for a call center in where you need somebody who speaks French, for example, but they're going to be working in Athens, Sam, would you advertise in the local language, or would you potentially want to advertise in the language you want somebody to be speaking?
It's an ongoing challenge. It's an ongoing challenge. So the common, and it depends where we're advertising the role as well. So if we're advertising the role in Germany and we need a German speaker, they're still going to need to speak a bit B2 level of English, which if you understand how the different language classifications work, B2 is you could get by pretty comfortably. And that's because all of the training and all the development within Athens, for example, is all done in English. So one of the call centers in Athens has about 15,000 seats with about 15 different languages going on. The common language is English. But does that mean that a German person is going to search for a job in Athens in English in Germany? Probably not. So we tend to play around with the headlines being in German and then the body of the body of the ad in English. We have German speakers that work for us, of course, and I've got French translators that we can have as well. French is an interesting one because a lot of people will speak French and English, but will only want to speak French. So our clients have come around to this kind of way of the French culture, so to speak, and a lot of the campaigns, or one of the campaigns specifically in Lisbon, is all in French. So they want French speakers. They don't need to speak English. It's the first campaign that they've kind of pushed through that have gone, you don't need to speak English. Everything can be done in French. It's a French company, happy days kind of thing. And we can have a job ad written properly in French, publish it in France, and I can pick up 30 candidates very, very, very quickly. But it's an ongoing challenge, if I'm honest. No, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. We get pretty much the same number of candidates through for our English ads as we do our translated ads, except in France.
I was going to say, but and as you say, understanding the cultural differences, where in France you would do it differently. Fantastic. Steve, so obviously in South Africa there are a number of languages in South Africa, and there are different languages on the borders of South Africa. Interesting question just internally in South Africa, Afrikaans or English. But how are jobs advertised? Is there a standard, or does it depend on which region in South Africa you're recruiting in?
We've got 11 official languages actually in South Africa. Many of the black culture languages, a lot of them speak across. So one will speak in Zulu, they'll be able to speak in Xhosa, all the different other ones. So in those cases, it's okay. So there are other issues around that though. But generally speaking, most advertisements are in English. I'll say 99.9%. Yeah. English is the spoken language, and many companies expect you to be able to communicate in English.
Yeah. So you have a standardization, as it were, across.
Yeah. There is a lot of Afrikaans as well. If you look at the mining sector, for example, a lot of Afrikaans, and a lot of the black folk speak Afrikaans as well. So, but that's because they've been brought up in those areas, like in the north, Limpopo, Northern Cape, those areas where there are mines. They're already speaking that language as well to a point. So, it's like kitchen talk in a way, as opposed to full Afrikaans.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So slightly different style of Afrikaans, but getting by in the language. I suppose a B2, as Sam would describe it. Yeah. In that. That's interesting because yes, I know a lot of South Africans that are living over in the UK have moved over to work, and they tend to all have a smattering of Afrikaans. Whichever part of South Africa they're from. So it's interesting to know how that is used over there. So while we're talking to you, Steve, I'm interested in South Africa itself. What are the skill shortages in South Africa, and what's being done to alleviate that? And is there anything any lessons that might be useful for the UK?
I think there are a lot of lessons. I think if you look at the big area right now, it's mainly in the more technical and artisan areas. If you look at artisans alone, we're about 40,000 short of what we need in the country right now. Right. And if you look at engineering, there's similar problems there as well. Doctors and nurses and that type of thing. But there are legacy issues because of this. And maybe we should talk a little bit about that so you can understand what that is. I think, before the post-apartheid era, obviously we still had the situation where we had separate schools and things like that. And what used to exist then was what we call trade schools. Now, I'm from the UK, so I understand in the UK you have apprenticeships and you go to technical college and things like that. So what those trade schools used to do, the guys the girls who were doing apprenticeships would be able to go to the trade school at the end of their apprenticeship and pass an exam, which would then qualify them as an artisan. Post-apartheid, all those trade schools were closed down completely. In fact, there's only one that's left in the country right now. So that's the first problem. And so what happened now then, of course, is that most school leaders aren't interested in being artisans. They don't want to do something like that. So they have to start looking at other areas. So post-apartheid, now I've been consulting here for 25 years, so I've been very much consulting I came here earlier. Most of my consulting has been in the post-apartheid era. So the problem we have at the schools now, of course, is the pass rates on maths. So if you've got schooling, I would say over 50%, just over 50% pass. Only about 50,000 on average school children get over 50. When I say over 50, that could be 51, 52.
Right.
I couldn't tell you how many in the 80s and 90s. So hence, there's a shortage of engineers because, as you know, in engineering, project management, that type of thing, you need to have those qualifications. That's a big thing. So I guess if you look at it from that perspective, what we can see is that a lot of the failure is because of the education system and the training system, but it's just because it needs to restart and rebuild, and it's taking a long time for us to do that. Unemployment, of course, is another area which is an issue. If we look at the unemployment, currently you're looking at 2% of the whites are unemployed, which is quite small. Right. Indian nation, 1%, coloured 7%. If we look at the black and African, 89% are unemployed. So, and where do we put these people? Where do we move them? Things like that. So what I found as a consultant, and I have dealt with a lot of different cultures as a consultant, And it's amazing what the cultural differences are. I was working with a guy, he was a very clever development engineer, and a black chap, and he was struggling in his work. And I said to him, well, what's the problem? I said, you do a good job. He says, yeah, I don't go anywhere. I stay the same. So I said, well, have you spoken to him? I said, no. And I said, why? I said, because we don't do that. You know, we expect them to notice us. I said, no. Go and speak to your boss and tell him what you want.
You have to promote yourself, put yourself forward.
Yeah, he wasn't aware of that. And I bumped into him in a bank about 2 months ago in my bank. He came up and shook hands and had a good old chat. And he told me that he thanked me actually for that discussion because he's been promoted, he's got a better position, he's got a team underneath him now, which he never had before. So there's a big need for mentoring in the marketplace, a huge need for that. And in my work, I do it all the time. So what are the reasons? At the moment, our currency is very volatile, as you probably know.
Yeah.
It's up and down. National logistics is a problem, traveling around, being able to stay in different places. Competition, new investment opportunities also an issue. And our regulatory environment at the moment is not good for SMEs. It's good for big companies, but not for small companies. Which then, of course, makes it harder for small businesses to take on people and bring them in and develop them. A lot of the reasons you got people coming to the UK was because of the affirmative action policy that was put in place in South Africa, which meant that companies would have to employ more other colour types of people. And of course we lost loads of people. And at the moment it's on average about 25,000 a year leaving our country for other shores because they don't want to stay here.
Yeah,
it's
quite a significant number. Yes.
That sort of happened in the 70s because I came over here in the 70s, and at that time there was also a big recruitment drive from South Africa to the UK. That's why you'll find if you go around the country, you'll find many people my age who came here and stayed here, didn't go back. So those are sort of the interesting things. At the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned that actually, that heavy recruitment in South Africa and the people, the heavy loss of South Africa. As I remember in the particularly in the 80s, there was a lot of talk about the brain drain from Britain. The highly skilled, highly educated people leaving the UK because the change in the economy, the jobs weren't there, the future wasn't there, so people were leaving, and I'll sort of come to that again a bit later, I think, because I think there's some interesting points we could look at on there as well. But I'm interested because again you came back to the cultural differences, and you know, as Sari's mentioned about the cultural differences and being aware of that in recruiting from abroad. Sam, you know, the cultural differences, particularly with the French language. And the way the French are really, as a culture, they really value their language highly. And you're seeing, Steve, you know, cultural differences in the workplace, people who push themselves forward or who don't based on their cultures and the progression they see in their jobs and how they view their prospects is really interesting. Sari, did you have anything to come back to on that cultural, the way people view their jobs culturally and differences across Europe potentially?
Yeah, because what Steve just said about the you know, the approach to the managers, the relationship with the boss, and I think that when I said that we need to understand the culture where we are recruiting from, but if I wanted to be a very effective manager, and I had people from different cultures in my team, I really need to understand the cultures of those employees, because again, if I did understand that, you know, this chap, for example, Steve talked about, that's the normal way of thinking in that culture, so that the person doesn't actively come to me as an employee, but I actually need to change my behavior towards him so that I can best utilize that person. So I think that is really essential, and it just comes back to the good management in my view, is that know your people wherever they are from, whether they are your own country people or people from different countries. The more you understand your employees, the better you can utilize them, because you do need to, it's this fact that one size doesn't fit all. You know, you really need to kind of deal with your people differently, and almost like, you know, bring the best out of them differently. And then in a way, I guess that the responsibility is also on the employee. So when I came to this country, I had to start understanding this country, and I had to start understanding how my boss potentially thinks differently than I do. So it goes both ways. We can't just, you know, give the cultural understanding to one party, but it's both kind of need to do their jobs. But I guess I sound like a broken record, but understand that's why I said I help people understand people, and I think that's why, you know, this cultural understanding, it is so essential. And you know, in a way, the world has become so small because we are all connected, and we are all much more aware of what's happening in the world, and we are communicating with people all across the world in Facebooks and LinkedIn and stuff. So it has kind of opened our eyes a little bit, but I think we are just kind of opening our eyes to that. We often talk about culture being like an iceberg. So it's the visible part is the one, you know, which is above the water. So we have started to understand those aspects of different cultures a bit better, but the fundamentals are underneath that water. You know, those ways of thinking, approach to authority and change and decision making, and I think that's kind of where we need to do much more work. That's my thinking.
That makes sense. Yes, I think that's Steve.
Just comment on that. Yeah, I'd just like to comment because it's interesting. Well, I've always employed as a consultant, and the funny thing about being a consultant is you always say, you know, you go into companies to tell them what they already know. It's not really true, but what I find is that leadership out of the box is the key. So, you know, you've got to get out of your box as a leader and get into your employees' box and understand them. And wherever I go in the work I do, I tell leaders that, you know, you're not going to get to know these people. They're not going to be part of your team unless you get out of your box, get out of your silo, and go and join them. You know, and make a team effort out of it. I think I just wanted to reply to it. Sorry, so I agree with that completely.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. Yes, it's really, really interesting points there on that, and I think we could probably do a whole discussion just on culture and in workplaces, even without the international aspect. I think that'd be probably. Well, to go a slightly different direction with the next question, and the next series of questions is very much opinion based, I think, for you all, and I'll start with asking, putting this to Sam, and then see what his opinion is. With Brexit, the UK has a reduced access to Europe for low skilled or cheap labour. We've traditionally brought people over from Eastern Europe to fill those jobs in care, in agriculture, in you know, manufacturing, even factory work. So how can we make up for that? Where do we look for those low skilled or cheap labour roles in the future, whether it's internal or external? What are your thoughts on that, Sam?
There's obviously going to be a difference of opinion here, and being, you know, I'm not an advocate either way. My opinion is my opinion, and at the moment we'll see what happens. I think it's a sad thing, and I was talking to Roger, who put this meeting together the other day, and he I said, especially at the moment where we've all proven that we can work from home, you know, there's people, I could go and work and live in Portugal. Why not? Oh no, I can't anymore. So that's been wiped out for us. In terms of the cheap labour, there's obviously laws that we have in the UK that mean that cheap labour is illegal, and that if you want to, you know, a minimum wage job is a minimum wage job, and that's in place for a reason. So the farms and I'm saying farms and companies that might have gotten away with it before certainly won't be able to get away with it going forward, because they can't bring people in on the quiet, probably, and kind of get away with it. And I'm not saying that's definitely happening, but I'm pretty sure it is, because the people that they're going to need to hire now are going to be people who are UK based already, being UK citizens or immigrants into the UK, whoever it may be, but they're not going to get away with putting people into those roles for £3 or £4 an hour, and that's the laws that we have in the UK that people are going to now have to work with. I think there needs to be a lot more thought that goes into certain aspects of it. So if we cast a glance over to Australia, for example, where there is the visa route, the tourist visa route. So you stay there for a year, but in order to stay there for a year, you've got to go and work on a farm in the middle of nowhere for a month. And then if you want to do it again, you've got to go off to the farm for another month in the middle of nowhere. You don't see anyone. You'd just be working, picking something or putting a tractor into a field and not stopping it for a day. And that gives you your route into the second year. So that, or the first year, and that could be looked at, but it's whether or not enough people will want to come here to the UK just to travel and bum around, so to speak, and get the work opportunity as a result. And I think that's been overlooked, but there will be, and I think it's been overlooked in terms of how to attract, the more nomadic kind of people. So we focused entirely on stopping people from coming and stealing our jobs without going, no, there's people that will quite happily come in and go and move around, as we do and we have done in Europe, and everyone does in Europe. It can kind of come and go and pick up little jobs here and there and then go somewhere else. And we employ a lot of those people. We have personas here. There's 3 personas. One of them, and the most powerful, is the nomadic kind of person who will go and live in Lisbon for 3 months and go and live in Athens for 3 months. And we do a very similar thing in the UK with traveling. But we do it in Thailand, and we do it in the Far East, or we do it in Asia. We don't necessarily do so much of it from the UK in Europe. Maybe that will change. I don't know. But again, going back to your question, I think there's certainly been an oversight in assuming that we can only bring in people who will work full time into specific roles. Whereas actually there's a great opportunity to allow that more nomadic person to come in and kind of pick up a little job here and then go off and do something else. Because a lot of people will want to do that, and they won't want to sign up to a massive, great big visa, proving that they've got the right to work or a job in the UK and that they can earn £24,000 or whatever it is in the UK. And that's not what people want to do sometimes, or skilled based people. Yeah. So again, when people refer to the Australia system is really geared towards bringing in skilled people, but it's also massively geared to allowing people pretty freely to live in almost work, or certainly travel within Australia and do those little jobs on the side, because it benefits the economy of Australia, because no one else wants to do those jobs sitting in a field for a month on end, but people will do it. Have to do. There is my opinion.
No, that's a good opinion. Yeah, that's what we're looking for, and I think it's a really interesting opinion, because it is, I think, potentially not something that is worth debate, because if the labour from Europe isn't coming in to fill those lower paid vacancies, the vacancies that the British nationals typically don't tend to be wanting to do, as we've experienced, is that going to mean that the companies are, particularly the bigger companies, are going to focus on recruiting British nationals to fill those less skilled and lower paid vacancies, and spend their time and their money recruiting higher skilled people from abroad, and thereby flipping their recruitment model, so that, because it's more worth it, it's more valuable for them to spend the time processing visas for high skilled people, and recruiting low skilled. And I'll come to Stephen Surrey on this in a moment. Has that got the potential risk of de-skilling the British workforce, because they're being paid not to be skilled and they're not being encouraged to be skilled because those jobs are coming from elsewhere?
I don't think so. I think again, my opinion is, let's wait and see what happens. Obviously, that's going to be a massive hindsight if it all goes horribly wrong in 6 months' time. If it goes really well in 6 months' time, we just kind of, or 6 years' time. I should probably say. I think there's definitely more of a push, and there will be more of a push from places like job centres and stuff to push people into these roles that they wouldn't necessarily have chosen to do. But actually, it's a job and people want to work. And so a lot of people want to work. There's people who don't, and they end up in the news. And as a result, we have an opinion. But in terms of upskilling people in the UK for UK jobs, there's still people going to university. There's still people who are wanting those skilled jobs. I've worked minimum wage jobs before, but that didn't stop me from wanting a better job that I am now in. But that was just going through life and being 18, 19, 20. So yeah, I think there's definitely going to be more of a push to get people into the kind of roles that wouldn't have normally been taken up by British nationals, so to speak, by the job centre, by the WDP. But in terms of, is it going to de-skill the UK labour force? I don't think so, because there's still going to be people who want to get into those positions, and companies aren't going to be paying visas for people to come in from overseas if they can find talent in the UK. Yeah,
no, that's a very, very good points. And actually, it's interesting you say it's same experience as you, working 18, 19, late teenage years doing the minimum wage jobs, and it might be that's there could be a cultural change, and that might be what you do. It's potentially, depending on what happens with the economy, that could be the new gap year. We never know. Yeah.
I worked in a pub for 2 years on and off, and then I lived in Greece for 2 years on and off. And you spend 18. You go to university being absolutely set on what you want to do in your life, and then you come out of university and you kind of get into that job, and then by the time you're 25, you go, I didn't need to do that. I didn't need to do that. And then you get to 35 or 40 and go, actually, this is what I want to do. You go back to university. So there's a whole journey there from whatever. But if we're looking at low skilled, low paid workers, I think there's always going to be people around, whether it's their job, their dream job, probably not. But
it's a job.
Work. Yeah, it will work for now and then move on. I'll stop talking and let someone else talk.
No, that's all right. Some very good points there, Sam. Really interesting. And I'll come to Steve next on that. And potentially, Steve, what impacts does immigration have on unemployment in South Africa and employment? How does it affect South Africa, and what type of people? Are they high skilled, low skilled that are coming into South Africa? Oh, you're on mute, Steve. Still on mute.
As if we were going to get away with a meeting.
I know. I thought we were going to go perfectly through. Jill, are you able to unmute Steve? If you can hear me.
There we go.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Yeah. So Steve, yes, as I said, on the back of Sam's reply there and everything, South Africa, how does immigration work? Are you having high skilled or low skilled people coming in? What impact is that having on unemployment and employment in South Africa?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Obviously, because we're part of SADC, South Africa is very much a desired destination. But other countries like Nigeria, Zimbabwe, etc. So what you're finding with those countries, a lot of the people coming in, generally speaking, are either skilled or semi-skilled. Okay, a lot of them are coming in like that, and a lot of them are coming in as sort of entrepreneurs. They're coming into the country to try and develop things and make a decent income. There's two sides to that, because one thing is many of them who do come here, they don't keep their money here, they send their money back to their countries to look after their families, because you'll find they leave their country as an individual, come to South Africa, but their family's still staying in where they come from. So that's the one negative of it. But what's interesting though, I looked at the stats, and generally speaking, each of those immigrant workers that come in creates 2 jobs here for other people, which is something of interest. But the other thing is that we've got around 15 million undocumented foreigners in South Africa. I'm sure the UK is not like that. 15 million, okay? And what they're doing is bringing in a lot of counterfeit goods. And of course, selling those goods, because we have a lot of street sellers, so they come along by the side of your car, offer you stuff through the car window.
Right.
And a lot of those goods are counterfeit goods. So a lot of people are taking up jobs doing that because it's the only thing they can do. So in a sense, It's got a good side and a bad side too. So if we look at self-employment here, 25% of those immigrants are self-employed. And if you look at the locals, it's 16%. So it's interesting, in fact, that they're likely to actually increase economic growth in our country, and they are. So that's a good thing for small business. However, the other side of the coin, from a highly skilled point of view, I think that's where we've got the issues. As I mentioned, on average, up to 25,000 people leaving a year, all highly skilled. And obviously why now is because they're in demand. If you look at recruitment agencies now, they're global. I mean, there's so many that I've lost count. And, being global, well, look everywhere. Like you've got like Gulf Talent, you've got a couple of UK-based ones that you go and look at them. They're always looking for people from here in certain areas like cyber security, technical, finance, all those things, engineers, because they're known to be very good, and that's why they take them. So we're looking at around a 34% shortage, if you look at that, of skills in that area. And what they've done is they've come up with a critical skills list to government, and that they're promoting that at the moment in other countries. And if you did qualify from another country, it's quite a robust process you have to go through. You've got to be in a professional body, you've got to have certain qualifications, so many years experience, all the things they require. You can get a visa for permanent residency, or you can get a temporary visa for 5 years. So I guess that's something for the future, because at the moment it's not really got any traction. And I'm hoping going forward we'll get a lot more people coming in, because it's got several factors. It's going to benefit our fiscal, in the country with the economy. So we don't see it as a reduction in employment if they're coming. At the moment, we obviously need people. It's not going to cause more unemployment. It's going to create employment.
Yes.
So we want them to come here, obviously, and it's positive, very positive. But obviously, we need to look at our policies. And I guess the government's going to need to promote it a lot more through the embassies and different countries, and spend some money to do it.
Yeah.
But, so if it's working for the local African countries, it should work for them as well. Yeah.
No, okay, that's very interesting, and I think there's going to be there's potential parallels there with the way the UK may look at bringing in skilled labour in the future. Different ways of looking at that, as Sam mentioned about the the Australians' method of getting people into the lower skilled roles. I think high skilled, different visa methods, the temporary and the permanent, to bring in there. And I think it was interesting what you said about the entrepreneurial. It's people coming in to start businesses and then hiring and recruiting, which really, Sari, you didn't arrive in the UK to set up a business, but you've arrived in the UK and you're in a consultancy business, and you probably know a lot of people, entrepreneurs who've traveled across Europe. What's your opinion on that? Entrepreneurs coming in and setting up businesses and employing people. How do you see that happening? And again, go back to the cultural differences, people from different cultures running a business, employing people in the UK, and understanding those differences.
Well, I don't have that much experience in entrepreneurs coming to this country, but I think for me, nor do I want to express my opinions publicly. I have certain opinions about this whole situation, but they are mine. But the fact is that in order for entrepreneurs to come here and start employing people, we need to let them come first. So how do they come if they are not allowed to come? That's the thing. And of course, I was in another panel yesterday, and we were talking about these cultural differences, and companies doing exactly that. They start finding markets in other countries, and there was a person who was from the States, and he was emphasizing really strongly that before you start dreaming about setting your business, whatever the business is, in another country, make sure that you know that country. So it goes back to the same, again, the same thing is that that it's fair enough people having the dream to come here or go to another country and set up the amazing little business and start employing the local people, but it's not quite that easy, because of course we know that employing people is a quite complex process. You know, the legalities and everything else to be taken into account. But it's this interesting situation we are in, because this our system here, you know, it was a free flowing. There were resources going out and resources coming in, and there was some sort of stability or balance. But now, of course, when it's a closed system, so the resources need to be found within, because otherwise it doesn't work. Otherwise we don't have resources. But how to make that work? And I was just thinking about when I was growing up, and times were totally different. But in Finland, for example, when you were at school, or you were a teenager, or you were in the middle of doing your A-levels, we always worked throughout our summer holidays. Well, we had 2-3 months summer holiday. And what did we do? We did strawberry picking, and we did berry picking, and we worked in farms. So we were those seasonal workers, you know, as we youngsters, and we got that work experience, and we got that pocket money, and we kind of kept that side of the economy going. Now, of course, that doesn't happen nowadays, but would it be worth re-establishing those kind of values? Because then the youngsters, they would have more meaning and purpose in their lives, and they would get life skills, and they would get some money, and you know, the self-sufficiency would come from that side. I have no idea if it's possible even, but that just came to our mind, that it's the whole setup has changed, and the recruitment and the movement of resources. Yeah, is it so that the higher skilled resources will be still moving, but the lower skilled, because of the heaviness of the process, that will stop, and that's why then the lower paid resources, one way or the other, must be found from this country through changing the system, the benefit system. I have no idea, but you know, it's just not possible to work like this without changes being made. I guess that's how I kind of see it.
That's it, yeah. And I think we need to, as in this discussion, I think we need to look abroad and see what potential solutions there are for these. You know, we often hear about, there's often a lot of talk in the papers, talking to businesses, business organizations, saying about skills shortages, and there's a skills gap. And it's interesting to think, you know, the responsibilities for that. Steve's mentioned, you know, there's a big skills gap in South Africa, which is, you know, due to, as he mentioned, you know, potentially trade schools closing, and significant emigration out of South Africa of skilled workers to the UK, as we had in the, you know, the 70s and 80s. And you know, I was having a discussion recently about whose responsibility is it for skilling employees? Is it the responsibility of the government for providing the education, for directing educational establishments to teach the skills, you know, trade skills, etc., to students? Or is it employers' responsibility for taking people and teaching them the skills themselves? I mean, for, you know, as Sam mentioned at the start, you know, one of the things that you take people who aren't skilled at working in call centers, and you give them those skills to do that. You know, maybe the tradition. Yeah.
Steve, I think it's down to the employer to find the right person in the first place, who wants to be skilled in that area. And I think, you know, you can't go blaming the government for not skilling people. You've got to find. It comes back to my point of knowing what you want to do in life. I think people go into university thinking they want to do absolutely one thing, and then, you know, 20 years later realize, or 10 years later, or 5 years later, they realize that's not really what they wanted to do. But because you're 19, you're under pressure, and you're being pushed into an area. That's what you want to do. But it's down to the employer to recognise what a candidate wants to do, and then and then work with that candidate to up their skills. You I was very lucky, and I say this because I've kind of gone through this recently with Logical. I was very lucky to be known the owners of Logical Recruitment for many, many years. And opportunity arose to nab me from where I was, having been furloughed for my sales job, and they wanted me to come on board as a marketeer. I didn't have a clue about marketing, but I'm open to learning. And on the same salary that I was at in my sales position, I was brought on as basically a junior marketeer to go and learn, go and understand it all. And that was a fantastic opportunity for me to come on board and do. And I did that for 8 months, and now I've transitioned back into a sales position because that's more my bag. And we also know what we need to do in terms of our marketing strategy going forward. And we can bring someone else in who can freelance, who can pick up the bits that I've learned along the way. So that not only benefited the business, but it also benefited me because I'm now upskilled in something I didn't have a clue about before. I did have a clue, that's not fair, but I certainly wasn't aware of entirely. So I think it's down, as I said, down to the employer to certainly find the right people in the first place and find the right driven people potentially.
And it makes you much more valuable to them having that extra skill. And I at university, I trained to be a systems analyst, and came out of university and realized the last thing I ever wanted to do as a career is be a systems analyst. So I know exactly where you're coming from on there. And I was listening to one of the founders of one of these electric scooter hire companies on the radio recently, and he was saying that they took on an internal, somebody who'd been furloughed from working on internal sales. And that's all his career. He'd been office-based working on internal sales, and they took him on and trained him how to be an engineer working on these electric scooters and, customizing them and working on them. And he's their best employee. They've taken somebody who had no experience, but as you say, Sam, the potential, and trained him, and he's become very valuable and very loyal to them because they gave him that opportunity. So I think employers do have a great responsibility for doing that sort of thing. And Steve, going back to you, and there's the positive discrimination you mentioned in South Africa, which is making a big change. Are employers there then upskilling the people who haven't been given the skills because the trade schools weren't there? Are they now getting the skills provided by employers?
So what's happened there, which is quite interesting, different perspective, is institutes have started getting involved. Like I've been talking to the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers, where they've got a whole project in place to do exactly what you said, is to speak to employers, but also chat to them about looking at training. So if we look at the Institute of Packaging, for example, I've done a lot of work in the plastics sector, so I know quite a bit about it. One of my companies in Cape Town has opened a university. So at the actual manufacturing plant, they've got their own university. So what they're doing is people who are interested in getting into plastics, like blow molding, injection molding, customer service, maintenance, they'll take people in there and train them. And hopefully employ some of them, or some of them might go to other companies. That's one example of what they're doing here. So I think the engineering bodies, professional engineering and institutes, that's the place to start. They must get involved, speak to their, their base, and say, these are the amount of people we've got, and we need to get them trained up, and can you help us? So it is happening, and that's just one example for you. But I believe there'll be more and more as we go along, because we need it. So there's an investment involved, but I'm sure there's some relief in tax and stuff like that they get back for doing that type of thing. So, yeah.
Yes, that's it. And here in the UK, we have the, the apprentice tax, which can be used for spending on training, which would be very, very important for that. So before we wrap up the discussion, just wondered, do any of you have any comments or points you'd like to make about international employment, skills, recruitment across borders?
I mean, something came to my mind just listening to Sam and Stephen. I think my take would be that yes, it is the government responsibility to skill people up to the the fundamental levels, so that every single person who leaves the school can read and write and do maths and have a basic understanding of the world and the society. And that's that basic level. That is the absolute responsibility. We pay taxes for that. When it comes to companies skilling their people, yes, because I think all companies, all businesses, they have their very specific needs and the very specific skills that are needed. So of course, then the companies, they do want to upskill their employees up to the level where they need to be. But I think there's a challenge now with the new generation Z, for example. So the young generations coming up, because their work expectations, they are pretty different from what they have been up to this point, whereby companies were aiming to employ people and have them stay with them for a long time. So they were investing in their training and upskilling, and people wanted to stay a long time with one employer because that was safe. It was safe. But now the new generation, they are much more. They are really keen on being trained all the time, but at the same time, they are not that excited about staying for too long with one employer. So that's the challenge, is that it's the balance that the employers would need to strike, is that, okay, I know that this chap is not going to stay with me more than 2 or 3 years, but I need to upskill them. So how much do I want to invest, or how do I need to, how much do I want to invest in that person? So it's going to be an interesting, I think, challenge and a change, how this, again, the balance is going to kind of come out, skilling versus.
It's going to be very interesting next few years, isn't it? See how it evolves, how skilling, how filling the skills gap evolves, and how the recruitment across borders works in here. And I think I think that it's important that we remain outward looking, and to see what lessons we can learn from other countries. From South Africa, from Europe, from Australia, and seeing how that can, how these different ways can benefit the UK, and how we can grow, and how our companies can fill their positions, using both the internal candidates and the external candidates. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see. And if we, have this conversation in 12 months' time, how, what will we know then, what will we have learned then, and then, maybe even 5 years' time. It'll be very, very interesting. Steve and Sam, do you have any final thoughts yourselves?
I was only going to say, don't take my point out of context, in that the government aren't required to make sure that we are skilled. I would say in a more professional life, the government don't have that responsibility, but they certainly do coming up for children. Absolutely. I would, without making this about education, because I know it's not, but I would question whether we need the certain levels of education within schools that we do have. Why is it a requirement that we absolutely have to know every adjective, verb and blah blah within the English language? Couldn't tell you what all of those things are, because I don't need to. If I wanted to be a writer, then I would be. I don't need to know the cosine tan of an angle in my life, and I think that's probably So why is that such a requirement when certainly a younger demographic would probably benefit more from the apprenticeship levy. You're coming out of school at 16 or 18, and you kind of really want to be a carpenter, or you kind of really want to be an electrician, and you've got your mate around the corner who's got an apprenticeship scheme with a small electrical firm. Well, go and do that then. Fantastic. You don't need to do A levels. You don't need to. But yes, so I think there's a point where the education system needs to recognise kids sooner, in order to realize that they're probably not going to be a mathematician when they're older, and they're probably not going to be a physicist when they're older, but they might be really, really good at music, or they might be really, really good at sport, and pushing that through. And America, for example, has an amazing sports system. It's amazing. It's phenomenal. And they find kids with talent, and they push them through the sporting system. And again, I think coming back to the whole education, the job thing, of narrowing down certainly in the UK, our prospects, so we can't use Europe anymore. There is definitely an opportunity to go, how is everyone else doing certain things, and recognizing talent earlier and pushing them towards the talent that they wanted, they kind of, at the moment, they want to do. You know, a footballer only needs to be a footballer until they're 30, and then they've got enough money to go off and do something else, or whatever it may be. And you know, that's so yeah, don't take my point out of context. It's not the government's responsibility. It is, but I think it's also the government's responsibility to put something else in place that recognises the talent of a child's.
The responsibility, I think you're saying, is the government's responsibility is to put the foundations in place for business to take advantage of and to run with, which I think makes very much sense. Steve, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I must say I agree with Sam. You know, I'm a sink or swim type. I'm naturally like that, and I've always been like that. So for me, I'll always get up and do something else. I always manage. I'm an entrepreneur by heart. The thing is, though, not everybody is. And I think from a younger age, my wife's a teacher. She teaches grade ones. Okay, so 6-year-old, somewhere in there. Integration is a key thing. Helping children at a younger age to integrate. In other words, preparing them for going out to wherever they're going to. Not this sink or swim thing where you'll survive, don't worry about it, you'll make it, you know. Not everybody's like that. Only a few people are like that. Well, and that's the problem we've got. Knowing the person, knowing their capabilities, knowing their character, their social skills, all those things coming together in the whole thing. And I think because I had my training in the UK, I was very fortunate. I had a number of people mentored me when I was at a rebellious age, between the ages of 16 and 20, and they taught me many skills which I learned and I still apply to this day. Most children and younger people these days don't have that advantage, so we've got to give it back to them. And it's got to happen at schools. It's got to continue right through the process. And I think that's the answer.
No,
I agree. America does it very well, Sam. You're right.
Yes, they have a very good sports recruitment network over there, don't they? It's very professional set up. So, well, thank you all for your contributions. It's been, I hope you agree, it's been quite an interesting conversation, and I think we could have, we could potentially have a much longer conversation on any of the points that we've covered on today. But really appreciated you taking the time to join in, Sari, Stephen and Sam. So thank you for coming and taking the time. Jill, thank you for managing the background for us.